we're super excited to host this webinar, and excited to welcome Craig Stoss, who has been a friend of Kodif for I think more than a year now, and has been supporting us with lots of initiatives. And Craig is a director of CX services at Partnerhero, and one of the most knowledgeable people we know about CX tooling, because Craig, because of his work, talks to a lot of people, does a lot of work in, around content. And Craig, would you be open to maybe introduce yourself, tell
Yeah.
more about Partner Hero, and your interest in data and in tooling in CX?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chyngyz. So, hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Craig Stoss. So, in general, I'm a CX enthusiast. I have been in CX facing, customer facing roles for over 23 years now. Everything from frontline support, consultancy, technical sales, and now then leading support organizations, and now really focused at Partner Hero on what we call CX services, which is really the idea that at Partner Hero we provide support services through an outsourcing model. And my team is there to make sure that our clients, we refer to as partners, are more successful with their CX tools. So we go in, consult, implement, and administer the types of tools they either do use or the types of tools they should be using. And we make referrals from our partnerships people, the people like Kodif that we partner with at Partner Hero, and feed those into our clients to make sure that they are running the most efficient support organizations possible. But yeah, my content spans tooling. I do a lot of research when it comes to tooling because my entire job right now is really focused on understanding the market, who the use cases, who's using it, why they're using it, and how it changes. And that's kind of how we met, how I met Kodif and Chingyz's team, and yeah, that's hope to bring some flavor of that to this conversation.
Thank you so much. And for those who don't know me, I'm a co-founder and CEO at Kodif. We're a CX automation tool which powers some of the interactions of agents and customers, and we use some AI and some advancement technologies. But today we're going to talk mostly about the marketplace of CX tooling and use cases we see. And it's funny how we met with Craig, because Craig, without meeting us in person, published an article about Kodif. And we just started. It was like we were maybe 7 months old. And Craig, and I think I'm giving a lot of credit to your research work, because not many people knew about us, but you published your opinion about us, and that was very, very impressive. So it basically attesting to your knowledge. Craig, maybe the first question. I mean, you are in the marketplace. You write a lot of stuff about CX tooling. What do you see in the market? What are the trends emerging, and maybe what are the tools you're mostly excited about in the past maybe 3-4 months? What you're
Yeah,
seeing?
I mean, clearly, artificial intelligence has been top of mind for the past probably 6 months for a lot of people in our space. So when I think about trends, that's the first one that I probably have to mention. But honestly, it's not so much about AI at all, really. It's more about what it enables. And I think the trends that are really important right now uh, are things like personalization. And by that, I mean, customers have this expectation who they are. You think about their experiences in the B2C world with Netflix and Amazon, where you go there and there's custom content presented to you. Facebook, Twitter, all these places are spending millions and billions of dollars to get you what you want to see, in most cases to try to sell you something or keep your attention in their apps. But that's the experience people are used to, and I think that's translating into their support needs. Is that they're calling to support, and when you say, "Well, what's your name? Where do you live? Can what problem did you have? What version of this thing are you using?" All these questions, these triage questions, they're sitting there going like, I'm your customer. Shouldn't you know this about me? And so
Mhm.
personalization is important, right? Being able to recognize who's calling you, why they're calling you, and AI makes a lot of that easier. But it's really not AI. AI is not the innovation here. The innovation is how do you build a personalized conversation. And those, for example, the Shopify integration into Zendesk is great at that. A person emails in, it immediately shows their order histories, things that might be relevant to you, such as what stores they've bought from, or what products they bought, what they might be refunding, things like that. So that's a really important trend. The other thing that I think is becoming more important is and I mean, it has been for several years, but in different ways, is self-service. I think a lot about when I first started in support, the big thing back then was error message coding, because error messages could have more than one meaning. And so error coding was a big thing. Oracle is like the master at this. I don't compliment Oracle often, but every error message had a 5-digit code, and you could Google that code, and there was tons of ways of people on the internet finding that, describing what happened, how to fix it, or even Oracle themselves documenting it. That world has now changed to the point where if you do have to have an error message, that error message should either completely guide them to where the solution is. Like, I hate error messages that say something like, oh, you can't do this because this setting is wrong. Go to settings, /X/Y/Z and click this button. And I hate that, because it's like, well, why couldn't you just put a link directly to that button? Or better yet, why can't you just put that button in the thing and say, do you want to turn this on? And that's the type of thing that people are getting more expectations. So self-service kind of started out as Google it or knowledge management problem. Now I think it's really a workflow problem. How are people in the flow of using whatever your product is able to support themselves? And that may involve a knowledge base. It may involve a chatbot. It may involve AI, but it's more about how does that workflow flow together. I think those are two of the biggest trends. And then I think the third one that really is AI focused is what we're seeing now. This idea of auto generation of text, what I'm calling dynamic macros, and I know your Kodif does some of this, but this idea of products that can really speed up and bring faster resolutions without losing the value of a human connection. So, macros, they can be robotic. Automated marketing messages, they sound like automated marketing messages. I actually saw a YouTube clip, something that Google is planning to release, where you can export client information into a Google sheet and then run a script using their version of, I think it's called Bard, I think is their version of an LLM. And it will automatically generate a customized marketing message per customer based on the columns that you've put into the Google sheet. So you could set out mass marketing with purely unique messages on a per customer basis, which I think is brilliant, because how many times do you get the same marketing message from multiple email addresses, or you're sitting across the table from someone in the same industry, your phone beeps and it's exactly the same carbon copy email, right? Engage with people more personally, things like that are really interesting to me.
The worst one, Zach, is the worst one when they say hi and then brackets first name, right? That's
they forgot to fill in the auto tag. Yeah. So those are probably the three trends I would start with in these conversations.
Yeah, this is super interesting. And because you're the tooling expert, Craig, any tools you think or you see that they're kind of delivering on these trends? So personalization, self-service, and auto generation. I think we do some work in that direction. But if you know any more companies that are doing similar work, I think would be great to learn more about that.
The AI tool stuff is really new, right? And I think there's a bunch of tools that I've seen pop up on various forums, Twitter, LinkedIn, things that I follow. And I don't know, I think it's too soon to say who's doing it well, right? So I don't really have a take on that market yet. There are tools. I think I mentioned to you Cohere is one that I've seen recently. Kaya was another one. So but these are companies I don't know. The agent assist stuff, there are some really interesting tools in the agent assist space, right? There's idiomatic and forethought. There's operative intelligence, which is more of a support ops platform. The Loops is there as well, another company that I do a lot of work with. And these are tools that and this probably goes to some of the conversation we're about to have, where we talk about the challenges, right? Where, it used to be in the market. Think about telephone systems or chat tools maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago. If you printed out all the logos of all the companies in that space and put them on a wall and threw a dart, you probably could choose that tool and you would get at least the basic features of what you were looking for. Like telephone system, you would get a working telephone system. It may not have the specific IVR thing that you wanted, or some specific metric was missing, or dashboard or report, but you would get a telephone system.
Mhm.
Tools nowadays, I don't think that's true, right? There's so much overlap and segmentation simultaneously, which sounds like a contradiction. You really have to be very specific with your use cases. So when I look at the tool market now, it's not just about I want to bring AI into it. I want to speed up ticket resolution. It really is about how you want to do those things, and there's tools that fit across the gamut. I'm trying to think of some other ones off the top of my head here, but any of these tools, Zingtree is a good example that brings workflow into your Zendesk flow. I think that's another trend. Maybe I should have said that earlier. Any tool that helps with this stuff needs to be embedded inside whatever it is your help desk tool is. So Zendesk, Zoho, Freshdesk, Salesforce, whatever it is. And because as soon as you exit, you're losing something. You're losing context, you're losing time, you're losing attention, you're introducing risk and errors. So I think that's the other thing to look for in a tool, is one that embeds right into your system. So those are some tools off the top of my head that I think are really good in this space. And I specifically in the AI space, I think it remains to be seen, to be quite honest, who does this well, because it's such a new, every day, like, it blows my mind. Actually, the one thing that blew my mind most recently is the release of the GPT-4 and ChatGPT plugins capability. So Zapier, Shopify, who else? There was a bunch of them that were connected directly in.
Zapier,
Yeah.
OpenTable,
OpenTable, yeah.
Instacart launch.
All of these things are amazing.
Yeah. Everyone is saying it's basically an app store for plugins. So, and everyone is very excited about this as well. So we're also like thinking about what we can do there.
Well, tying it back to CX, the use case which is just resonating in my head right now, thinking about the power of this, is imagine a world where you don't care who supports you anymore. You go to your ChatGPT assistant thing and type in, my Whirlpool dishwasher broke. It's showing error code E07. It's making a clunking noise. I need help. Go. And ChatGPT recognizes that it's a Whirlpool. It recognizes what product it is, and it goes out. Maybe it goes directly to Whirlpool's solution or knowledge base, or maybe to a person, and a message is auto-generated saying this is how you fix it, or this is the part you need. And ChatGPT can give you all this stuff and say, here's the solution, here's the link to the part. Do you want me to buy it? You can say yes, and it goes off and charges it to your Amazon account. You don't care. That the idea of channels within support could be disrupted here. This idea of we need phone, chat, email, whatever, that to me is gone with this stuff. And this is the power, in my opinion, of some of this app store that ChatGPT is getting involved in, because I just you could just see how it connects so much information that you as an individual don't necessarily care anymore about the branding or about the searching. You don't need to search this. The self-service becomes instantaneous by the virtue of the knowledge of ChatGPT and the connections it has.
Yeah, that's such a big idea. I think we are also thinking about not something similar, but I think the way you're thinking about turning this ChatGPT interface into like a global help center, right, where you can pretty much ask anything, and also like if they're integrated with all this larger companies' internal systems, then you can even do actions, right? It's not only about asking a question how to do this, but also going and resolving this problems like getting a refund or returning an item and stuff like that. Very cool. Yeah, one thing we're experimenting right now, I think, and this is something, you and I, we worked with and talked about it, is how ChatGPT and GPT-4 technology now is enabling turning, smaller companies into like tech-enabled, data-driven companies in like with a snap of a finger, because now you don't need as much data as you used to, right? As for example, only large companies were privileged to use this ML capabilities. Now I think what we are excited about, that SMB mid-market companies now can leverage GPT-4 to its fullest extent. And for example, a couple of use cases we're working on is how to turn your KB knowledge base, how to turn your knowledge base into a chatbot in 3 clicks or something. And this was not possible before. So we're at the so early innings, but the future is pretty exciting. So
I mean, you're totally
yeah,
correct, right? I think the
go.
GPT-4 model has really revolutionized who has access to this. It's democratized AI, right? Solutions don't have to be expensive because uh, the underlying technology is now no longer expensive. Where when it was all proprietary and developed by the companies themselves, there had to be an ROI for them to do so. So I think we have opened the market up a lot. And you're right, it's early innings.
Yeah. Also, Craig, switching gears to maybe like the CX tooling. So imagine I'm a CX person, CX manager, and I'm evaluating tools. I'm thinking about where to start. So what's your framework? Like, how would you recommend a new CX manager to think about tooling, which tools to prioritize, and what evaluation criteria the person should have in their mind when they look for the right tool for their team?
I I think that every company needs to look at technology and kind of CX tooling in three categories, I would say. The first I call ticket enhancement, and this is the idea of bringing more context in the tickets, agents being able to have smarter conversations, and this is what we already talked about. The idea of knowing who the customer is, what they've purchased, maybe what the 10 last clicks were in the product, what error messages they've encountered in recently. One example I've used on other podcasts is I went to a restaurant that I hadn't been to in over 3 years, and they had some data somewhere stored on me so that when they sat me down, the waiter that sat us down said, "Mr. Stoss, welcome back. We know you haven't been here for so long. And we also wanted to note that the wine you ordered last time is no longer on our menu, and we've done the favor of highlighting 3 wines that are similar to what you ordered last time to help your decision." That takes nothing to do that. You don't need AI to do that. You just need a database of what products did Craig order as at this restaurant. That to me is ticket enhancement, right? That little thing is something that I would never ask for, but the fact that they personalized the wine list for me because they knew roughly what type of wine I enjoyed is incredibly powerful for a customer experience. So that's the first one. Find out how you can enhance your tickets, enhance the service you provide through more context, more information about the user and the use cases of that user or customer. The second one is I call ticket reduction or ticket deflection sometimes, and this is the one most people are familiar with. I This again, as I said, it used to be improved knowledge management. It used to be good knowledge bases with a good search engine, a tool like Solvi sitting on top of it, being able to guide the user to the right answers faster. I think that's still important, but I think we're moving beyond that now in our world, and I see the trend of in-app guidance becoming more important. I see chatbots and deflective tools becoming more important. I see repetitive tickets being auto answered by a GPT or an LLM enabled technology of some sort. Any tool that can help you reduce the tickets that your person handles, your agents handle, and the reason for that isn't workload, in my opinion. Yes, it's a benefit. Maybe you need to hire fewer people. Yeah, there's definitely money involved in that conversation, but more so, I think that's so that you can over index on things like empathy and customer service. Because if you're answering, how do I reset my password tickets 25, 30 times a day, that's a disengagement. That is, if you're having to do tasks that are just repetitive and boring, it's disengaging, it's not fun. There's no chance for learning. Whereas if you're working on the harder problems or the more empathetic problems, you can stretch those muscles, learn how to write a more empathetic email, uh, learn how to just show that you're human to these people. And I think that's really important in these
Yeah.
decisions. And then the third trend to me is product and service delivery. And so this is where tools, like I said, support operations platforms like the Loops come in, where it's like, look at insights across your system. I call this voice of service. I think many people on here probably have heard of voice of customer, which is survey feedback and often including tickets. That's really important. But voice of service to me is including everything: sales calls, the ratings from success management tools, implementation details, certainly surveys and tickets in there as well, product usage details, all these things together, such that you can tell what products and services are needed to be delivered, even without necessarily asking a customer on a survey. You can see that most of your errors come from, customers within the first 3 months who use this particular feature. So you know that your onboarding probably wasn't good enough, or your training materials wasn't good enough, so this person couldn't succeed because they're a new customer. They're for the first 3 months, and potentially that feature is flawed or designed incorrectly. You need to correct it. That's something that insights can bring you, and it can change the way you deliver products and services. So those are the three trends. And the second part of your question was how to approach this. And I would argue that you approach it from the mindset of understanding your use cases and understanding very clearly what your use cases are in each of those three categories, because they're going to be different if you sell a physical product or a software product. Um, and approach it from the standpoint of, how do I improve my human element? So often when we talk about technology and tools, people immediately jump to, how do we replace the human element, or how do we reduce the human element? While that might be an outcome, I don't think that should be the goal when getting these tools. The tools should be there to improve your people, improve your service. And if that results in the longer term, medium to long term, as a reduction of need, that's fine. I mean, that's just business. But if you set it with that as a goal, that then you're buying a tool for the wrong purpose, and you're implementing it for the wrong purpose. You're implementing it for maximum ticket deflection, which may not be good in certain cases. If you're in a healthcare business and someone is calling you when they're very emotional, are you wanting to deflect their ticket just with a chatbot? No, you want to provide the higher empathy. You just want to make the repeatable stuff that isn't an emotional, right? And so you can over index on this stuff. And I think that's got to be a key consideration in any of these discussions that you have within your company.
Basically, you're prioritizing your use cases, making sure, like the goal is not, just deflection itself, but improving processes and improving and amplifying your people, right? So that's kind of the takeaway. Also, one question, Craig. So in terms of these three buckets you mentioned, do you think it depends on the stage of the company where they should be prioritizing the ticket enhancement versus deflection and versus the product discovery? So do you think this is stage dependent, or maybe something else?
That's a really, really good question. I think that every company can benefit from all three of those buckets, regardless of the size. I do tend to agree that when you get into the bigger insights tools, those tend to have a cost barrier, higher ROI needs, and so it becomes harder to get into that space and get into those tools. So they'll probably better at scale. But yeah, I think in general, everyone should start with the ticket enhancement piece. And why I say that is that if you're a startup and you're trying to differentiate yourself in the market, if you're selling a new product or you're selling a unique product, service is one way to do that. That's been known. I mean, Forrester and Gardner were talking about that even 10 years ago about how customer experience was a differentiator. I still think that's true. Um,
Mhm.
if you're a restaurant and you offer just these little tiny things, if you're a flower delivery company and you know you deliver your flowers with some little thing that makes people happy, you know, those a personalized thing that makes people happy, that helps, right? And so I think ticket enhancement is probably the most important and the one that any company can get into because these things don't have to cost money. Um, and then ticket reduction is also a good thing, kind of as you go through the self-service model. And then maybe later stage companies focus on the bigger insight stuff, the product and service delivery.
And when you talk to your partners at Partnerhero or some other people in this space, uh, what do you see? How people are looking at ROI conversations whenever they're getting tools
Yeah,
when they purchase? And,
yeah. ROI. It's the number one challenge that people ask me about is how do I show the ROI? How do I convince my executives that this has value? It's probably this. I think if you and I solve that problem, you know, let's just go out and consult on that, and we'd be millionaires. Um there was this phrase that I started bantering about a few months ago. In fact, I want to do a talk on this at a conference coming up. That I'm starting to formulate the idea. So this might be a little rough, but my thought is this: we're very familiar when in software specifically, but elsewhere, you know, in service industries, it works too. Of the death by a thousand cuts. The idea that, you know, one individual bad thing is not that bad that we're going to lose a customer, but if there's a thousand of them, the customer is going to be like, I'm done with this product or I'm done with this service. Very true. I've seen it happen. You know, it's a customer experience story that everyone's probably familiar with on this call. CX, in my opinion, is the exact opposite of that. It's success by a thousand hugs, is my phrase. So, you know, one little thing, you know, I'll go back to my wine example. If that restaurant offered me wine and then served me the worst food I've ever eaten, or served me McDonald's food at, you know, when I was paying a higher price point or whatever, or the waiter then slapped me across the face, that one little small wine thing that I was really impressed with wouldn't have mattered, right? But if you do everything, if you do all these small things correctly, over time that adds up to more loyalty, that adds up to a reputation, etc. So ROI becomes a hard thing to discuss because, you know, we talk about tooling. What is the ROI of putting in this tool? And people immediately jump to headcount. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. You could say, well, this tool saves us, I'll make the math really easy. It saves us 40 hours of work a week. Therefore, it's one person. That person costs us 70K a year. Therefore, we need to, you know, the price point of that tool has to be less than or equal to 70K before I get an ROI. Very simple math. But what if the tool plus this other thing that you do plus this other thing you do, some of those things may not cost any money, some of them may not cost anything. All that adds up. What if that value outweighs the 70K? And now all of a sudden you're earning more business, you're renewing business more frequently. That's the type of thing that I think is more interesting. So how do you have that conversation with an executive and how do you convince people of ROI? I don't have a great answer. I think it's explaining the value of customer experience and using, especially if you have one of these insights tools, to be able to point to it and say, hey, look, everyone, in this particular insights tool, this particular insight shows us that our customers are really having a pain point here. We need to fix this. And we need to do something about it, whether it be a service or a product change. That's really the best I can do for an answer. There are tools, operative intelligence. I don't remember if I mentioned it already. They have a really neat feature where they can drill down by ticket category, by person, by whatever split of metadata you have, and tell you how much you're spending on a given data point. And that's a really interesting metric because you could take that back and say, look, this feature of a product or this service we provide in service time is costing us X, and we can solve that using another solution for Y. That's the ROI. But that's a very specific use case. So long-winded to say I don't have a great answer, but I hope some of those ideas help the people on this call.
No, super helpful. Also, we got a question from Sarah Wilson Cullerton about. So the question is, do you have any guidance on developing an AI strategy and prioritizing what areas the support flows to automate?
So developing an AI strategy, I think it starts again. I'll start with the use cases, and maybe that's an obvious one, but start with what use cases are causing you problems. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my clients, they were doing a refund process that took 8 minutes. They had to go to system one and get a piece of information, plug that into system two. Then they had to get some payment information, go to system three, put that payment information in. By the time they hit the refund, that was 8 minutes. And they were a larger business. They were doing, a few dozen of these a week, of these refunds. Now, 8 times 12 right there, 8 minutes times 12 is over an hour. What is it? Say 89. It's over an hour and a half anyways.
96, yeah.
Yeah. So you already have a use case where you can say, this is a pain point. This is taking too long. We're doing it too frequently. And then you can start to look at, well, what solutions do we have to that? Workflow automation is one of them, right? If you can use a tool like Kodif to one click and say, do this refund, and it goes out to all those tools and pulls the context in and refunds it, you've now literally reduced 8 minutes to one click a second. That's where I always start with these strategies. And then when it comes to prioritizing, the workflows, it depends on what you're prioritizing, what you're optimizing for. So are you optimizing for speed, like the example I just gave? Maybe you're optimizing for the best service delivery. So let's say you're starting an implementation team as part of your CX team. Being able to use AI to tell what parts of the product need the most training or the best guidance, or people are struggling with as far as implementing the product and onboarding themselves. Those are important. If you're in a product-led growth company, you might really be hyper focused on how do I get people working in my product effectively within seconds or minutes, and how do you optimize for that? So I would say prioritize the workflows based on what you're trying to optimize in your overall company strategy for a given quarter or month or year, whatever your OKRs type thing are. So I hope that answers the question, though, but it really comes down to start with where you already are observing problems. One thing that I don't think we do enough as support leaders is we don't count the clicks. This is a term that a friend of mine, Jeff Beaumont, who is a senior director of success operations at a company, software company. If you look over your agent's shoulders, not from a micromanagement standpoint, but just watch them, and do this a couple of times a quarter. Just shadow 4 or 5 people, varying seniorities, and just watch what they click. I guarantee you will find either people doing the same things differently, which is obviously leads to some inefficiencies, or people doing things that are just taking way too long. There's a better way of doing it. I did this with a client of mine, and we found people didn't like the Zendesk macros. They felt that they weren't up to date, they weren't clear. And so I saw 3 or 4 people had created their own Google Docs full of their own macros, and would switch screens, scroll up and down to try to find the macro, copy and paste it in, and start to edit it. Incredibly inefficient, because they all were maintaining their own sheets. They were all copying and pasting it in. The search, you couldn't search it. You had to scroll up and down and read each one and know where to find the one you wanted and copy and paste it. Like, just finding something like that is an improvement. And you don't even need AI to do that. You probably could use AI to do that. There are products that will record screens, but it's stuff like that if we do more of that, you'll start to really be able to be precise and surgical about what use cases you're attacking.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of, I mean, you touched, I think, two interesting points. I think one is kind of implementation, but number two is this metrics, right? Metrics on, let's say, agents, productivity. So, and at the same time, I think there is a, I think, fine line, right, between productivity and also the quality of customer service you're providing. Can you speak a bit more about maybe how to think about metrics, CX metrics? You know,
Yeah.
this, of course, CSAT and NPS, customer effort score, and then on the other side, average handle time, first time to reply, and all these things. Like how you think about these metrics in a holistic, in a more holistic way.
So if anyone follows my content on LinkedIn, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of traditional metrics like average handle time and CSAT and NPS. Um, Especially when they're being used to judge success, and especially when they're being used to judge success of an individual. I think that the conversation has to be switched between these metrics, or from these metrics to being judged on the value delivered to your customers. So the question you really should be asking yourselves are your customers seeing more value? Are they seeing that value faster? And is it somehow related to the changes I'm making in the customer experience I'm delivering? Sure, average handle time can help show some of that, but it's not really a metric that people think about. For example, if you reduce your average handle time from 4 minutes to 3 minutes, that's a 25% improvement. That's by any stretch of the imagination, that's an improvement. That would be a green box on a QBR or something you're delivering to your executive. But from a customer standpoint, that might be imperceptible, right? That what is 1 minute? And so is 4 minutes to 3 minutes what the customer wants? No, but in most cases, not, right? So we're celebrating ourselves, patting ourselves on the back. Hey, we reduced it by 25% because of something. And it really doesn't matter to the customer. We're not delivering any more value to the customer. So really the question becomes, did you meet or exceed the value the customer expected on a given interaction? So maybe more first response times, more first response resolution, sorry, not first response time, where first response resolution is important. So are you closing more tickets faster? That goes back into my ticket enhancement and those types of things, right? Like, are you getting enough context that you don't need to do research? You can just answer the quick ticket immediately. Uh, Smarter conversations, are they getting better value? One of the things I developed a program at a previous company, which I'm just incredibly proud of. It still exists, and it's now actually a full-fledged product at this company. But back in the days of on-premises software, we didn't have all the access to log files through the cloud like we do today. And so we had a tool that would take certain files that the customer could send in, attach it to a ticket. This tool could look at those files, and it ran it against pattern recognition stuff. It wasn't AI driven; it was purely pattern recognition, and it could tell you the top 100 problems, top 120 problems, I think it was at the time, if you were experiencing them or if you were likely to experience it based on the information sent in the log files, etc. So a customer could call in about problem one. We would do this analysis, and then we would go back to them and say, here's the solution to problem one. But by the way, we noticed that you're running into problem two, three, and four. And here's a whole report. It generated an HTML document we could send to them that showed them by priority what could go wrong with their system. That's value, right? It took no longer. We didn't reduce average handle time, probably. In fact, we might have even increased it if this tool took a long time to run, but that was providing more value to the customer because now they didn't have to wait for something to break and then call us and say, hey, this is broken. We were telling them in advance, this might break. You might want to address this problem. Those are the types of things we need to switch into. Um, and how do you measure that? Well, you measure it through your sentiment analysis, the tools that you're using to gather your voice of customer feedback, your Twitter and social media you should be monitoring. It's more of this like metric of how people are reacting to you. And that's a lot fluffier. I fully admit it. But it's one of those things that I don't think reflects well in NPS and CSAT. The example I always gave with NPS is that if all of your customers rated you a zero, you were the worst company on this planet and they all rated you a zero. And then, you got a new director of CX and they came in and said, here's all the amazing things we're going to do. And you worked your butt off 80-hour weeks and did everything you could possibly think of in the CX space. and every single one of your customers in the next survey rated you a 6, which is a huge leap, 0 to 6. In the NPS world, that's still a 0, right? Because 6 is in the neutral zone or whatever, the detractor zone. That's still a bad rating, right?
Yep.
And so what did that person fail? Did that director of CX fail? No, of course not. You improve. So it's one of those things that there's metrics, the way they're calculated and the way they are reflected is disingenuous to the things that are happening in the background. But value is never disingenuous because you can always show the value to your customers in those conversations.
Yeah, I think Gartner released this value enhancement score, right? I think a few years
Yeah,
ago. It
yeah,
basically shows the confidence of a customer after the interaction, if this interaction provided value, or, let's say like I got better understanding of how to use this product, how to get more value out of this product as well.
yeah.
And yeah, I think NPS and CSAT, I think they're the way we see them here at Kodif is they capture also a lot of product experience, right? And for example, NPS, even the CX team did an amazing job, like you said, but the product really failed. And the question is like, would you recommend this, to your friend from 0 to 10? Of course, I would say 4, but even the CX team went above and beyond. So I think, and another score I think we're kind of like here at Kodif, it's called customer effort score, which is a bit more, operational, very tactical, which is like how easy made it for you to resolve this particular problem, right? From 1 to 7, I think. And I think this is something very operational and more tactical. So yeah.
I like
It,
customer effort score. I think it makes a lot of sense for sure. And value enhancement score.
value
Absolutely,
enhancement
two
score.
good metrics.
Yeah. Also, Craig, coming back to implementation question, because one of the biggest challenges, I think, as you know, in the CX space in general, and I think in tooling as well, it's implementation. Because one of the first questions people ask is, how long does it take? How much it's going to cost? Who's going to maintain it, right? And all these things. So, what do you recommend when people are assessing, right? Your partners are assessing CX tools, how to think about this implementation, like costs in terms of money and time, maybe more time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's kind of why my team exists now is people don't have the skill sets and the time to implement it, and so they're coming to my team or within Partnerhero to get this done. I think that it goes back to the ROI question. You know, I mean, very well, for example, AIs need to be trained. So when I see some of this marketing stuff that says, "Oh, out of the box, immediate responses, and we'll start solving your problems instantly," and the stuff we've been hearing a lot in the past couple months, uh, I always take that with a grain of salt because sure it might be true, and I can go to Chat GPT, the open interface right now, and ask a question, and it can give me a decent response. But I have a tone, I have a brand voice, I have product terms that aren't indexed. I have a whole bunch of knowledge around my product that isn't indexed, and so it's going to give the generic responses, but it's not going to be specific. It's not going to be tonal, the similar tonal to how I conduct my team. Um, and so I think that implementation is really important there because you want to invest the time to make sure that the implementation is correct. It goes back to it. What is perfect is the enemy of good, I think, is the phrase where you do have to make sure there's a maintenance on this. It's not about one and done implementation on most tools. That's especially true with help desk systems and anything that's providing insights. You need to constantly tweak it as new things are added or new teams are brought on or new channels are opened up. Um, and so the advice I typically give to the companies I consult with is, if the company offers those services, it's worth working with the company on those services directly. because if you have to hire a third party, it gets expensive. Or make sure someone internally has that knowledge, because eventually there is going to be a maintenance level that you may not be able to engage with the company, depending on the company and the product service offering. And I also am a big believer, again, in that phrase of perfect is the enemy of good. Is even the worst tool only provides some level of value to you, um, if it's implemented roughly well. I think the biggest tools in the space that I see done poorly are customer success management tools. I see tools like Gainsight to Tango, which are awesome tools, um, but their implementations take forever. They're and people forget about them, or they don't use them, and I just find that the value isn't often received, even though it's massively available to the companies, because you can do so much with them. You can have so many triggers and events, and so it's not so much about implementation. The implementation could have been perfect, but if you're not going to use it or train your people on it and how to use it, how to maximize that value, you're going to miss out.
Yeah, totally. I think also the processes, right? I think the best tool in the world, but on this messy processes and with bad implementation, not gonna bring to good results. So that's definitely true. Yeah. Um, so we have another question here, Craig. So with all the new tools, can you read in the chat, or do you want me
Yep.
to
Just a second.
to
Yeah,
read
here it
it?
is.
Yeah.
With all
So
the new
how
tools
should
and tech,
CX? Yeah, go ahead.
with all the new tools and tech that aid in completing tickets and resolving repetitive questions, how should CX leaders change the way they hire the rep? Has the profile changed? CX tech and flows evolved. What about the head? Yeah, so I, I think it has, right? If it hasn't already, it will, right? So, um, if AI can be trained properly to understand how to identify an issue, how to respond in your tone, your brand, with your product language, um, how to personalize using the context that's given, and sound like a human, and maybe just have a human to approve the message versus have to craft the message. Um, I think that it's taken away a lot of the research element of support. And so your agents can focus much more on the customer service side. So for example, there is a big there's a big difference in my opinion of resolving a ticket and providing a solution. Because resolving a ticket can be very cold. It's a heartless phrase, like, this happened, oh, here's the response. But the solution is much broader than that. It's the way you present the resolution. It's the way you follow up on that resolution. That's the piece I think you can hire more for in the future, right? It's this idea of, um, not just solving the problem, but solving it in a way that people are delighted and at the end of it. So I think that the hiring profile changes to people who have more of that empathy side. The other thing that I think changes is that, especially when it comes to like technical stuff or products that evolve, or software products that evolve fast, is that you need to have more uber product specialists on your support team. So where you probably used to do like a generic overview of your whole system, and then rely on knowledge management or knowledge transfer or test path box environments for your agents to provide their support, or test products, whatever the product is you sell. I think what happens now is that someone who knows this product really deeply needs to be part of the training of the tools that you're putting into place. So if it's AI, it might be training it on a new interface, a new set of language, a new use case you solve, new sets of errors that are potentially there. And so there's also an element of things like tech writing, or maybe even more technical coding, low code, no code people, and things where you have to be conscious of updating constantly the thing that's now sitting between your agents and the customer. So those are the two things that I see changing. Focus more on customer service skills and empathy, and providing the overall CX of a resolution, and have people on your team who who can help you to make sure your tools are constantly evolving. That's sometimes referred to as support ops, and maybe it should be called support ops. But people who can help your tools evolve constantly, update your chatbots when things change, update your AI training so that it knows the right terminology, put better content in your knowledge base. Um, and if I were to pick a third, and I know this is a long-winded answer, but I really like this question. The third might be people who can speak product language, because in my opinion, the biggest thing that comes out of a lot of these tools is that you can focus more time on improving the supportability of your products. So if you're answering fewer questions and those questions can be answered faster, then you can focus on, well, why did that question come in the first place? What was it in the product, or what was it in the service we delivered that was broken that led to that product, that ticket? And then you can figure that out and go to the product team or go to whatever the services team is and have those conversations about, hey, if we just fix this, we've now eliminated this type of ticket. And that might not be applicable to all companies, but I think that's a really interesting hiring profile as well.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's a great question.
Great question.
Yeah. One question on data, right? Craig, I know you're a huge fan of, you know, data and empowering agents with data and stuff. In terms of skill set, and in terms of, I would say the ability of an agent to go and, you know, um, do some stuff, get the relevant data and resolve customers' problem, and to your point about being able to speak the product language, how to how to screen for the skills, right? How to, like, I don't know, like at the tactical level when you're hiring reps, how can you run your interview in a way that you're, you know, kind of looking for this, and you can see that the person has this skills and abilities to you know, maintain this high level of service.
The biggest one for me is probably critical thinking. So questions that exercise creative and critical thinking. Um, and I don't mean that in like some of the gotcha questions like, oh, count, you know, how many gas stations would you estimate are in Chicago? You know, some of those questions that maybe were popular back in the early 2000s is, but I think more of thought. You know, one thing that I'm a big believer on in interviews is saying, listen, here's a type of problem that we have within the scope of this role that we're hiring for. Walk us through, just with no prior knowledge, walk us through how you approach solving that problem. That's a real critical thinking skill, because they don't, presumably they don't know your product. Maybe they do, it's possible, but they certainly don't know the role. But they can walk you through their thought process, and you can evaluate how their mind works by seeing what they've explored, what questions they ask you back, what you know, just their overall approach. And they may come to a completely wrong conclusion because they don't know your product or they don't know your processes internally. But it's not so much about the end result, it's more about how did they get to that end result? Was it a logical path? I've asked people questions like this, and there's no way I could connect, you know, the thought A to thought B to thought C to thought D. I'm sure some of the stuff I've said on this webinar probably people couldn't connect because I ramble a lot. But it, in most cases, I would argue that what I've said is probably logically flowing. It may be out there, but that's the thing. Like, just follow. Was it a thought process that logical? Did they pause and think for something, or when they asked you a question back, did they reflect on what the answer to that question was? That's the type of interview skill that I think is important in this new world, because it helps you assess um, it helps you assess if the thought process they follow is unique, which is cool, right? I'm a big believer in hiring diverse skill sets, and if they come to a conclusion using a path that I never would have thought of, that's a value to me, right? I want that person on my team, because now when we're discussing a problem, there's two perspectives that are very unique on how to solve a problem, which means you're going to come to a better conclusion or better outcome. So those are the types of questions I like to focus on in interviews. I think that was the whole of your question, right? What types of questions define the skill set?
Yeah, we're kind of coming to an end here. Craig, one last question on maybe podcasts or books you recommend. If someone wants to learn more about CX in general.
Yeah, I mean, I love Rick Denton does a podcast called CX Passport. Love it. I think it's always informative. There's science of CX. Stephen, whose last name escaped me now, but Stephen is his name. I actually saw Devin on the call join. She's doing a new project called the CX Smoothie podcast. Just started. The first 3 episodes were great. One of them was mine, so I'm tooting my own horn there. But yeah, those are podcasts. And then I follow a lot of Twitter. There is a huge CX community on Twitter. If you search hashtag CXQOTD, question of the day, there is a whole community that every day gets together and answers really interesting CX questions. I read through those threads almost every day because I think there's so many cool little valuable insights and opinions and tidbits. That's a really big one. So yeah, those are probably the main sources I get. And as far as books, I prefer books that aren't specific to customer experience and support. Like one of the book here in the middle, the orange one, is a book called Risk by Dan Gardner. It's a great book that discusses how people think about risk and how they internalize risk. Awesome for support. There's a book called Predictably Irrational, which is by Dan Ariely, which again is more about psychology of how people think. It's great in a support context or a customer fit context to know how people think, because then you can design your processes to take advantage. That sounds really bad. Not take advantage, but utilize the way the brain works naturally to provide a better experience, because you can catch some of the common errors that you people make. So there's another book. That yellow one here is called Multipliers. That's an interesting leadership book. But yeah, so I tend to focus on books that are more about how humans think and how we go about things, because I feel like that improves the way we provide services to our customers.
Yeah, this is great. Craig, how do people find you on Twitter, LinkedIn?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn as Craig Stoss, probably the only one on LinkedIn. And then on Twitter, I'm at Stoss in support. All one word.
Awesome.
That's how you can, or stoss.ca has all my content. stoss.ca.
Awesome. Craig, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. This was Craig Stoss from Partnerhero and Chyngyz Dzhumanazarov. My last name is very long. Co-founder and CEO of Kodif. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Bye. Craig, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chyngyz.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.